Wonderful. I think we are good to get started. The micros work, so thank you, Matt. Welcome, everyone, to this roundtable, which Kai earlier today framed as the higher education roundtable, and that is how we called it internally in our preparation and organization committee. And why is that? Because we thought, given all the attacks on universities, on other institutions of the democratic state, but particularly also on universities, with mounting media coverage, but also all kinds of reports on attacks of or limits on academic freedom, we thought it was time it's a timely topic to take up at an academic conference, and particularly also in a field such as ours, public policy, regulatory governance, because we are generally interested in how government operates, right? We want to understand public policy, the outcome of political decision-making processes, and that is where, of course, limits and attacks on academic freedom will first be felt. But it's not only on research. We may sort of feel it very directly or experience it very directly. It also raises questions about the public engagement role of scholars and researchers more in general. And of course, also it raises questions on teaching and curriculum design. Do we need to adapt and change what we teach or how we teach in times in which universities and academic freedom, as we were used to it over the past few decades, at least have become under pressure across a range of contexts. And that was sort of the starting point for this round table. And it's my great pleasure actually to moderate it. My name is Thurid Hustedt. I'm here from the Hertie School. I'm the Dean of Graduate Programs here and also a Professor of Public Administration and Management. And I had the pleasure, together with Kai and our dedicated team, to sort of organize this conference. And I'm also very happy and very delighted to present this very distinguished group of speakers on this round table. And I will start sort of that way in introducing all of them. The first is Professor Joseph Weiler, who is a professor in law at New York University. He has been, over the past few decades, a leading voice on questions of constitutional law and European integration, and also the role of religion in public life. So that is covers some of your research and areas of expertise. Professor Weiler is not only a professor in law at NYU, he also was president of the European University Institute in Florence for a few years. And he is also very active as an editor, as an author, and also as an editor in academic journals. So, welcome, Joseph Weiler. It's a great pleasure to have you here. I'm also happy to welcome Katarína Staroňová. Katarína is Associate Professor of Public Policy at the Comenius University in Bratislava in Slovakia. Katarína does research on political and administrative relations in Central and Eastern Europe. And I think she's one of the key scholars of that area and in that region. And Katarína has a lot to tell about what does it mean to do empirical research, in particular under conditions of contested freedom under populist governments and authoritarianism. One of her latest publications includes a handbook on political patronage and politicization, which is, I understand, published these days, right? And in that book, Katarína co-authors a chapter, and we will come back to that chapter indeed on the implications of populist government and authoritarian practices in government for empirical research and what that entails for researchers. So welcome, Katarína. Very, very glad to have you. And also, David Levi-Faur is here by my side. I think I don't have to introduce David much in detail in this audience. Everyone here knows you. But of course, just to make sure we are all on the same page, David is a professor at Hebrew University and one of the leading scholars in regulatory governance. You've been foundational to the field. We discussed this and heard that yesterday also in the keynote speeches. And I think you're not only a leading voice on that field, you also have a lot to say on what it means to sort of do research under changing political circumstances, and also what that may imply for students and teaching and the curriculum development in our field. And so, David, thanks for accepting this invitation to this roundtable. And so I'm looking very much forward for all three of you to sort of get involved into this discussion. I would also like to have it as a very sort of open discussion. So if one of you wants to respond or react to what one of the others has said, please just come in and do this, so react to one another. I would also like, towards the end, open the floor, of course, to questions or comments from the audience to be sort of, to enable discussions also between this part of the room and that part. So that is important. And in general, we thought and discussed on, or I thought about how to structure this discussion and how to sort of bring together various perspectives on that broader topic. And the whole idea sort of is sort of starting from the why to the what does it mean, so what are the implications and what can be done then also when it comes to the implications of polarization, populism, authoritarian practice for us as a field, and in terms of how we teach and do research and what our role is and maybe should be. And starting with why are we seeing all of these attacks? That is the first question I would hand to Joseph Weiler, and broadly sort of asking you, particularly in the US, we have been sort of seeing a lot of unpleasant news, so to speak, of attacks or recent attacks, accusations by the second Trump administrations on universities, particularly elite universities. And that sort of comes hand in hand with polls from Gallup, for example, that tell us that the American public has lost trust in institutions of higher education sharply over the last 10 years. And so my first question to you is, where's this coming from? Why do you think we see this right now?
So, there are no easy answers, but at least to start, talking about Trump is difficult because I'm not a psychiatrist, so it's a little bit complicated. But the usual premise is that there's always a political objective. He's doing it because he thinks it will strengthen his base, that it will be popular with people, that he will gain in terms of his status and stature among the majority of Americans who voted for him. And what he's doing is, on the whole, they support it. It's wrong at a whole variety of levels, but I think we all understand that, this attack on academic freedom. It's not an absolute value, but he has certainly crossed any line of legitimate interference with academic freedom. What I find particularly ugly, that in a totally hypocritical way, he's justifying this as protecting us against anti-Semitism. That's the narrative that he's presenting. These 10 universities which he is targeted, among them also, well, 2 of my universities, both Harvard and NYU, the claim is that this is to defend those poor Jewish students against anti-Semitism. It's totally hypocritical. I mean, this is the administration who comes to Germany and says that AfD is the future of Germany. So I don't think he has any genuine concern and it actually increases anti-Semitism. Now, a word of caution, it's not as if there's no anti-Semitism, but that is not Trump's agenda. That is just an excuse to do what he's doing. But when we speak about populism, we always point our fingers, you know, Kaczynski, Orban, Trump, Marine Le Pen, etc. But if I take France as an example, I don't think that 20 million Frenchmen and women suddenly became fascist. So we have to ask ourselves, not about these people, but the support they get. And in the United States, but this is also true for Europe, the new class system is based on education, and there's a strong anti-elitist thing. And of course, what he's doing is totally wrong, but we have to ask ourselves, how have we contributed? I mean, our class of people, how have we contributed to this? And we have contributed to this because the kind of support that he's gaining is based on a very strong anti-elitist sentiment in the United States. And the anti-elitist sentiment is partly justified because these people feel disrespected. And they are disrespected. They feel disrespected in the work that they do. It's not considered valuable work. They feel disrespected because their children don't go to college. And that's, if I say that the class system is not so much about money, but about education. So we have to be mindful of that and ask not what only prompts Trump, but what prompts the support for Trump. So I think that's the short answer. The short answer to your question. I want to say, and please don't understand me in any way justifying what he's doing or what is taking place, but we say we have to protect academic freedom. But the institutions, the quote elite, unquote institutions with which I have been associated, there is a problem of academic freedom there. In my current institution at NYU, but I also hear it from my students at Harvard, Catholic students will not dare in public to say I'm against abortion. And I choose the example of abortion because it's a morally complex issue. It's not an easy issue. I think homosexuality is an easy issue in moral terms, but abortion is more complex. So when Catholic students tell me we would not in public with our fellow students express our views and say we are against abortion, I give this as a proxy. We do have a problem of academic freedom before all this Trump begins. There's a certain what can be said and what cannot be said in so-called progressive institution. Again, this is not to justify in any way and shape what Trump is doing, but it does mean that when hopefully the storm is over, also in that respect, we have to do some soul searching. Can we really say, apart from in a formal sense, that our institution truly respect, in a Voltairean sense, academic freedom and academic freedom of expression? And I don't think the answer is an easy, of course we do.
Thank you. That brings me, David, to you and to the Israeli context, which is different, but there were also discussions about limits or threats to academic freedom in recent years, particularly also surrounding the judicial reform. And so how is your sort of experience on that question of academic freedom in the Israeli context? I think you can just...
Okay. So thank you, Thurid, for the question, and I must start with that I completely agree with Professor Weiler. My feeling about the situation in the United States and indeed the blames that say elite institutions or liberal elite taking part in cancel culture is disturbing. It's not easy to see when you are part of this kind of I'm pro-abortion. It's very, very difficult to allow this and to actively protect this the other side. But we are on the left, we can, or the liberals, we can be as offensive and as canceling as the other side. Now, going back to Israel, or going to Israel, I would say that we experience similar attacks, but not to the same extent. We are privileged in academia still, despite almost 2 years of constant attack on the Israeli democracy and the liberal democracy and so on. The forefront is the judicial system, an effort to destroy it or to limit its autonomy and let the politicians rule about everything. And, well, maybe rule is in the sense of governing, not rule in the sense of following rule of law, right? It's more about their discretion. We were elected, we will decide. But it's still surprising how the Israeli institutions on the issue of freedom of expression is still holding the fort. The Israeli academia is protesting government for a few years now. Well, if you go even before, we are in the street for almost a decade, since 2015, really. And it's only growing. The protest is also growing. Part of the strongest part of this protest is against the so-called democratic reform, but also against the war in Gaza, especially nowadays, especially after actually defeating Hamas, and in this moment where the horrors of October 7th are really not forgotten, but we have 18 months after, and gradually the Israeli public is starting to understand what's going on in Gaza and how it could be different. And I think it could be different. So all those issues are, of course, connected. And the effect of Trump on Europe and on Israel is highly negative. We are surviving. Israeli academia was always part of the liberal society, always against the government, doesn't matter which government in many cases. But at the same time, we are persecuted by some of the radical left in Europe and the United States, being boycotted and so on. So we are, in one end, we are against the government and are pushing against the government, our government, and some of the public. And the other end, we are fighting on our place in the liberal world. So we are being cancelled under the excuse that we don't want to cooperate with the Israeli institution in some place, right? But what does it mean, Israeli institution? It means Israelis, right? And now I can see the distinction between institutions and people is not that big, and it applies. What I feel now applies to, say, Russia or any other country which is government, or whose government is really problematic, but still the population is not always responsible and cannot be responsible for the crimes of, say, the crimes or the inappropriate activities of government. This is true to Gaza, of course, but it's also true to the Israelis. Yeah, thank you.
May I just add one question, and how all this, how you see this reflected in classroom and in discussions with students?
There are few styles of teachings or engaging with politics in class. I try to put politics outside class, politics in the sense of those very difficult questions out of class. But I meet my students in the demonstrations, and they have access to my Facebook, and they know. But I would not use my position as a teacher to educate. because I think, also because I'm not that effective as educators, they have other sources of influence that shape their mind. And I think that a more balanced approach and taking distance from the most pressing issues is useful for the students. And I'm optimistic about this strategy, rather than making my class a political propaganda, basis for political propaganda, and so on. I was just reading an article in New York Times about a professor in New York, one of the colleges. I think her name is Finkelstein. I don't know if you maybe read it. She was fired from her college. She was really pro Hamas, and she was fired from her college. And I thought it's not. I don't like it that she was fired, but from the paper or the newspaper article, it was clear that her class were political propaganda. So it's not me, not on regulation and not on Israeli-Palestinian issues.
Okay, thank you. So keep it out of the classroom would be your sort of conclusion in a way.
I don't keep liberal trade out of my views on liberal trade regimes and Trump out of the classroom, but really put it in the center put the Israeli-Palestinian or the undemocratic government or efforts of the government to rule. I prefer to keep it outside the classroom. And serve as an example of somebody who is trying to be balanced. Because if the class is on regulation, there is enough material to speak with the students beyond that.
Thank you. Katarína, I mentioned your book chapter already. You wrote about empirical research in public administration and governance under sort of authoritarian conditions of authoritarian practice. And I would like to just ask you to share a bit some of your lessons or insights and experiences. So what does it mean, and in what way affects your abilities to do research?
First of all, I would like to say that we were two authors, that we were trying to reflect on our experience, but also on the experience of other people. And there is a strong bias towards Central and Eastern Europe and what we experienced there. And our reflection were done on several levels. Of course, the first level is the one that I guess all of us see as the first one, and that is access to data. And that is not only in terms of that with authoritarian practices, and that this is what we define, that we are not really looking on the regimes, but practice, that any liberal democracy can have some authoritarian practices. And this is one of the first things that data, which in regular democracies are considered to be given, that there is administrative data that are collected by bureaucracies and that are accessible to the researchers. This is not the case. That means that the data might be not collected at all, deliberately not collected, or maybe even manipulated, might be not really have the honest value as we would think it has, or simply are very difficult to gain. And we as researchers have to then have various tactics. First of all, how to get these data, if they are, or collect manually, or even verify if this is truly so. We have to be really careful about who collects these data, how it's collected, for what purpose, and what does it mean for the data itself. And the same is also for people. We are researching political administrative relations, so we are interested in the people, in the system. And to have access to these people is extremely difficult. And it takes a lot of time to build what I call trust networks. That means that if there is truly going to be access, that I can rely on the validity of the data to get from the, let's say, interviews or surveys, I have to be known to these people, and the people have which has again implications for the research itself, because these are the networks that, in particular in polarization, have two camps. So if I have access to one network, then I don't have the access to the other network. And what does it mean again for the reliability of the data and what we do with that? So we try also to reflect on how can we, in our research papers, to reflect upon that, because usually in the methodological chapter, we try to talk about what were the data, etc., but we don't talk about the non-data, which are not there, or what were the difficulties. And this is something that we try to urge, that we should start really reflecting about the silence about these data. So that's one level about the data. The other one is about the ethics, and that is that, again, it is given that we want to have informed consent, but in these countries, informed consent means for many of the people that they sign that they are leaking information, which can be very threatening for the people inside of the system. So how to go around that? We should definitely not push, because our primary task is really to protect people. So how can we deal with that? And then, so we try to also to assure that anonymity is the very important part, but how to go around it, how to secure anonymity when some of the tools that we use might be not trusted. I, for example, don't trust my computer at the university, so I would never put any data into my computer at the university. And this is just a simple thing to think about, but I think it's very important to start a discussion about that, because we take it as for granted that academia is independent. And then also on conceptual level, and that is that it took also me a long time to realize that simply some concepts do not apply in very polarized and authoritarian type of countries, and then it's difficult to start reflecting upon that. So what can we do about it, and how can we really turn the coin and come and discuss the concepts that do reflect the reality. So these are the issues that we try to bring forward in the chapter and reflect upon that.
Thank you. I think both dimensions, so data collection issues as well as conceptual questions, are very relevant also for the broader field of research of governance and public policy, public administration. Also, particularly, I think it's very important what you're saying, that in recent decades, you could say, academia in general has moved towards, worked a lot towards improving on data security issues, privacy, data protection, informed consent, and what we call research ethics. But we learn from you, and that is what I take, that that is much more difficult to implement and to comply with these conditions that are often also required by funders, for example, right? To in such under such conditions as you described them. I think that is a very also important topic that deserves more attention and also discussion. And David, I would like to sort of bring you in here and ask, you've been doing like research on regulatory governance for decades under all kinds of governments. And would you see, do you have similar experiences as Katarína, or what is your take on that?
I guess I'm going to disappoint you. I see just improvement in the last few decades. My only complaint is too much regulation. Much of it comes from ethics and accountability. So it's better to have this kind of regulation than regulations that constrain my for other reasons, right? Ethic, integrity, professionalism is very important. So probably the situation is improving. The environment is much bigger nowadays than 30 years ago. The number of people who are doing research, the number of institutions, the possibilities, the ability to travel, the ability to do research, the funding, it's really, I think, improving. From my point of view, I'm speaking about the situation in Europe and the state as I know it, and also, of course, in my country. So it's really upsetting to hear Katarína speaking, the way she speaks. I'm coming now from, I'm professor, kind of visiting, George Soros, visiting professor at the CEU, the School of, the Department of Public Policy. And they were expelled from Budapest. And so what I'm trying to say is that it's not something new, all those kind of difficulties. We should be courageous. We should take the historical perspective and be confident that we can fight those people who need psychiatrists. And we should take some of the blame, all right? We should always improve. But the problem is, the major problem is not with us, not with the regulatory state, I prefer to yesterday, and not with the academia. Many problems, but we can do it, we can improve, and we are improving via time. Sometimes I think we have too much money because money that is given to higher education is not going to school or kindergartens and so on. So we are privileged in some countries, in some institutions and so on, with all those limitations. And we need to probably fight. And hope that we will not pay too much for these fights.
So we need to fight. Tackled another important part of this discussion, and that is namely for what is the role for us as scholars and as an academic field. How could we, does it challenge the way we see our own role, how we engage in public, and what we see as a task or essential role and perhaps, role of scholars, right? And that is, Joseph, a question that I would have to you. There has, within this broader debate, recently, I think also been a bit of a discussion on in what ways are we challenged as researchers, as scholars, in terms of how we speak publicly, how we speak up, when we speak up, in what way. There was talk about scholectivism, right? So are there changes in the sort of in the roles or separation of roles between scholars and researchers on the one hand and more activists on the other hand, or how do you see this?
So one thing that has changed in this kind of role of scholars, not in the classroom, but we also citizens, is that we live in very, very polarized societies and very polarized discourse. You're either for us or against us. and also a degradation as a result, or connected with this, a degradation of the quality of discourse. We could call it the Twitter syndrome, that people don't read a 27-page article or a 250-page book, but they read tweets or blogs. And the result is, I see it, I'm a conscientious objector to social networks as a forum for public discourse. And I see the degradation even among colleagues that I respect, because when they enter into this kind of information society public space, they feed the polarization. Very short messages, very black and white. You're either for us or against us. So it's not just the problem of scholasticism, you know, sort of potentially abusing, I'm a professor, so you have to listen to me, but degrading the quality of the discourse, because when I go into the public space, suddenly one forgets the canons of academic discourse. Things are complex. Typically, there's more gray than there is black and white. And that doesn't go down well. And I see increasingly people, our class of scholars, succumbing to that. That's what gets you heard. The shorter and the more aggressive, quote, extreme, unquote, the message I put there, the more reactions I will get, the more quotes I will get, etc. So I think that's, for me, that's the real issue. It's not the debate about scholasticism, where, in what way should a scholar present himself or herself when they go into the public sphere, but how they do it. And in a great many cases, it's just lamentable. It's simplistic messages. It's academic populism, if you want.
That is a new term, or maybe a new concept. Thank you. And Katarína, you're a professor in Slovakia, right? Where the Fico government has moved really in recent years, or maybe months more, to really authoritarian practice. How does the Slovakian academia respond to that? Do you see changes in also sort of how people, or how professors, how faculty members behave publicly?
First of all, I would also like to say that authoritarianism in Slovak academia, but not only in Slovak, but in Central and Eastern Europe, behaves differently in academia, because I at least think it is related to the way that academic freedom is relatively recent. If you look at it from the historical perspective, we were years of communism where academia was not free, and I think that's still very visible or seen in the current academia. So there is not a clear-cut answer that, oh, academia is a clear tower of discussion and for democracy, etc., because it wouldn't be true. There are academics, and the polarization is also among academics, and there are universities that were established after the fall of communism, and which do not provide what the academic world should provide, that is bring knowledge forward and bring students and discuss and advance the knowledge. Some of these institutions are there to provide degree for the politicians. And this means that the academia is divided. Not only that there are certain institutions which call themselves universities, which I would never call them universities, or within a university that has some tradition, there are certain faculties or certain departments. So Unfortunately, there is not one front that we could rely, and that also means that the polarization that Fico brought is visible inside very strongly, and that is also visible how academics behave. They're very careful about what they say, how they say, but on the other hand, there are also instances where there is a clear discussion that yes, democracy is something that we have to fight for, and what we need to put forward. And I would like to bring forward this one instance that united academia in at least Slovakia, and that is that Fico just last week cancelled holiday which commemorates the end of communism in Slovakia, or in Czechoslovakia. And it's called the Holiday for Democracy and fight against fascism or totalitarianism, fascism and communism. And this holiday was cancelled. And it was academia that spontaneously, first one rector came forward and said, okay, if it's cancelled, we are going to grant students free day so that we can have events that would discuss democracy. And other universities joined, and now even private sector is joining. Okay, we will grant free day to the people because we still think that from all the holidays, we have to really, this is the holiday that's worth commemorating. And so I think it's an example that even in country where academia is split and there is no clear-cut answer, there is something that unites, and that is that there is a clear threat that democracy can be lost or can really be degraded. And so I guess this was an unintended effect of Fico, which meant that it united academia.
And has there been a political response to that or a pushback by the government on?
It happened only yesterday and the day before yesterday, so it's a very fresh thing that happened. I would assume there will be pushback because unfortunately academia in Central and Eastern Europe is dependent on politicians in many things, not only in terms of grants, but also in terms of how the rectors are elected. It's not completely independent as it is in other countries. So I would expect that there will be some pushback, but we will see what it will mean.
Thank you. David, you mentioned earlier, and you told us earlier that academia in Israel is sort of more on the liberal end, and is also protesting or has been protesting against the government for the past decade, I understand. And how does that? Has there been sort of political responses to that on academia or academics?
The parliament is trying, the right-wing parties in the parliament are trying, but they are failing again and again to pass legislation. It's not a guarantee that they will continue to fail, but there is all kind of efforts to make the academia more national in the sense of just depressing anti-government speech or pro-peace speech, but they are failing again and again, into an extent that you don't find in sometimes in United States and even in Europe. So the academy is really pushing harder against government. Just two examples, we organized a petition, 4,000 people from academia signed it. Another is the head of the president or the rector of one of the university in the south, Beersheba, if you know, just boycott a ceremony for opening a new hospital where because of the prime minister was there. And so those kind of actions that are going on and on for many years now, but also being escalated in the last months, I think they define the Israeli academia. It's not everyone, but it's a clear majority, 70%, 80%. And some of my, you were asking about the way I behave in class, and I feel I need to some extent, to explain myself better. Some of my colleagues would speak freely in class. No repercussions, not at all. But my point is, if I want to bring my positions on injustice, better to do it outside the class as a voluntary action. So I have webinars and tours, well, not too many, but I took the Israeli academia to the territories. And I'm doing now a webinar on the silent transfer by the settlers in some of the areas of the West Bank. So I'm active, but I'm trying to keep my sanity, and really it's really sanity by keeping my duties or my hobbies as a researcher, my identity as a researcher. So both the Palestinians and the Israelis, they are threatening my capacity to keep my bubble, the sanity that I need so much to continue to handle my life. And this is the way I do it myself.
Thank you. May I just add one more question? So how do students respond to that? What is the expectations of students in that respect?
So the student body is very diverse, and some of them I meet in the demonstrations. There is one student here that came and gave a paper with me and walking about 2 years. I didn't speak politics with her, and then I saw her in the demonstration. So the students are more conservative than the faculty. The student body in Israel is very diverse compared to other countries, because the share of population who is taking part in the Israeli academy is quite wide, especially with the colleges systems. But also the universities are now more diverse and more representative of the population than used to be before. And we don't have these elite universities to the same extent that you find in the United States. It's a more European egalitarian system. But I don't know what Joseph thinks about that. He has his own unique and the clever way to look at us.
So, should I answer?
Yes, please.
So, as academics, as professors, as scholars, we live, or we should live, with the fear of trésor des intellectuels. Terrible things are happening, and you did nothing. And history teaches us. So I'm in an uncomfortable position because I tend to agree with you. We have to find something with which to disagree, David. Let's make sure that happens today. So on the one hand, one wants to speak out. I'm in the field of law. Ultimately, law is about justice. So how can you not express your view, what is just or unjust? But the classroom is, I'm also a kind of old-fashioned, endangered species liberal. The classroom is a particular place because I'm old, experienced, with many quotes, distinguished. I'm 74 years old. My students are 25 to 30 years old. And if I come out in the classroom with a very strong position on this or that, I know that I will be squelching the kind of discussion that will be in class. People will not want to speak up and take a position against the professor, seem to be siding with the bad guys. seem to be whatever, unprogressive. So I'm disciplined. I have one advantage, which I never ever in my life have lectured. All my teaching is through discussion. So when students clamor, so what do you think about what's happening in Gaza, or what's happening in Ukraine, or any of these flashpoints? I say, let's talk about it. And I invite the students to present their ideas. And I see my role as challenging them. So if somebody comes up with a very progressive idea, I will say, but what about this and what about that? And if somebody comes up with a conservative, I will see my role in saying, what about this and what about that? And try and encourage that kind of this view against polarization does not mean that you have to be a middle of the road, that you cannot have your own very strong normative commitments. But in the classroom, I would consider it a successful class if all the points of view came out, where the students were not intimidated, were even encouraged to disagree with each other, etc. And I know this sounds kind of stupid, but I would like them to walk out of the class and say, so what does the professor think about this? And if they ask me, what do you think about this? Usually I say, well, you can go and read my op-eds or etc., but I wouldn't like in the classroom, I would think it's an abuse of my position, the kind of authority position in the classroom. So I think, I'm afraid that David and I seem to be on the same page when it comes to the classroom. I want to say just one more word, if I may, on the raison des intellectuels. What's the real test for an academic, for a professor, for a scholar? The real test of courage. It's not to support loudly in the classroom, depending on your philosophy of teaching, or outside the classroom, an opinion which I suppose that if I were in Slovakia, I would be with you in protesting against the cancellation of the Day of Democracy and all the rest. But the real test, and it's very, very rare, it's to go against your reference group. That takes courage. When your reference groups expects you a good card-holding liberal or you're a good card-holding conservative, etc., and you have to go against your reference group, where people would say, did you see what Weiler said? How can... And there's so little of that. It's so easy to say the right things where you will get 3 cheers from your reference group, or if you're on social network, a lot of likes. It's so much more difficult. And that's the real test of courage, to go against your reference group. So you can see that there's no easy way. We have to navigate. We don't, when we get to the end of, I don't know, the end of life, I want to be able to say to myself, nobody can accuse me in a serious way that I committed raison des intellectuels. But it's not easy in navigating this thing, in being both a responsible teacher and at the same time being a responsible citizen with points of view and fighting for a just society. So there are no easy answers, and very often we will find ourselves agonizing, was this the right position to... I usually don't agonize what is the right position to take, but did I express it in the right forum? Did I express it in the correct way? Did I show that things are... 2 more minutes? Please. The president of Colombia was criticized very severely when Colombia capitulated to the Trump thing. And I actually, first of all, I thank God that I'm not a president of a university anymore, that I don't find myself with the challenges that now they face. But having had that experience, you see the world in a different place. So when we had a faculty discussion, we should not capitulate, etc. I'll tell you what I said. I said that in the university environment, we tenured professors are the most protected class. Columbia would have had to have fired between 700 and 1,000 people if they had said no to Trump immediately, and long-term even more. There wouldn't be a single professor who was fired. It would be the secretaries, the porters, the administrators, the lab thing. Now, if you're president of Columbia, it would be very easy. I'm not saying if he took the right or wrong decision, but I just know that it's not an easy decision. Okay, I can show, etc. I won't pay the price. My professors won't pay the price, but I will have to fire immediately between 700 and 1,000 of the most vulnerable people in my academic community. That's not an easy decision to take. So I'm glad that I didn't have to take that decision. And when we had the discussion in my faculty, and people said, if this comes to NYU, and it will come to NYU because we're on the list of 10, I said, if you say we should not capitulate, etc., I want you to say at the same time that if the cuts come, you will resign. That it will not only be the vulnerable people who pay the price for taking the right position and resisting the administration. And I don't believe a single one of my colleagues would resign.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you very well sort of outlined the difficult positions academic leaderships are put into, and I think that is also an important discussion to have. Maybe in a second step, I would like to go back to what you said about the classroom and about teaching and about how we could think and about students and our programs. Also, what we experience here at the Hertie School is also in the past roughly 2 years, but probably that goes back longer. We are just more aware of it in the past two years, is that students increasingly find it difficult to discuss these contested topics, right? So they lack the sort of the instruments and the skills to really discuss among one another, but also in the classroom, these topics where they feel unsafe about or where they expect contestation. And I think that is something that that sort of challenges us as educators, but also puts us in puts a lot of responsibility on us in order to sort of enable that type of dialogue, right? And Katarína, I would like to bring you in here because maybe you can cause some disagreement or bring some disagreement here to the podium when it comes to the classroom. How is your experience from teaching and being in the classroom in such a bit of a polarized or contested environment?
First of all, I would like to come 1 minute back, and that is that I expected our academia to be more articulated, and that example that I gave, that was the first time that it was articulated. So that was why I was so happy about it, that finally our academia did find some common voice. All the other articulations are more individuals within the academia, which is, I think, a totally different thing. And I think that we do have a responsibility towards society also to lead discussion. And when the academia is silent, then this is not a good sign of academia. So that was my position about really being happy that the director did voice what the academia was thinking about the cancellation of the holiday. And I fully agree what you mentioned, and that is that students do not have or are not equipped with discussing, and polarization brought hatred and violence also in language and the way how contested issues are approached, and it is visible also in the classes. And we do have 1/3 of my students are Ukrainians, and it's difficult if the class is polarized, that then there is also a tendency not to sit with Ukrainians if there is a critical stand. And my role is really to put them together and to start a discussion, which cannot be done on the contested issues, of course, but to have classes organized in such a way that there is discussion and discussion on not easy topics either, but not contested topic either, and these are mostly value related. And I think this is a very important task that at least I have introduced or started to introduce in much bigger extent, and that is that whenever possible, and we have an outside speaker, and we have internships, or we have simulations, or we have hands-on tasks, we try to look on every issue from the perspective of values. What can be done, what can be seen there, how we approach the values, how we identify what are they and what does it mean for us as citizens, or us as students, or us as bureaucrats. And since we are having classes that relate to bureaucracy a lot, these are segments that are discussed. And I think that this is one issue that really is very important in terms of discussion. And the second is also building some relations, this uprootedness, I don't know whether it exists in English, that we lose the roots with the community. It is something that again, it can be discussed and simulated in the classes, how community outreach, how networks can be built that are not based on contested issues. And I think this is something that is important in the class.
Bringing back values, I think that is also an important, an important discussion in the broader and the social sciences, because I think, and that is concerns how we set up our programs, design our curriculum, because I think law is different in that regard, but across public policy programs, political science, public administration, over the past few decades, we have sort of focused a lot in educating or training our students in quantitative skills, econometrics, coding, programming, and all of this. And the question, David and I would be interested in hearing your view on that. Have we gone too far maybe? And do we need to go back or refocus and bring back values and normative analysis more also to programs of public administration, public policy, political science, compared to what we've done in the past 2 decades, maybe?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure, again, that I am the right person to answer. I do feel that quantitative, experimental modeling are very important, but I also recognize that they have costs in terms of missing the macro picture, not only the normative, but what is all about. When you are, and it's natural, when you focus on data or on method, you miss the theory, you miss the big picture. And I think I can see it everywhere, including here. And we should be careful about it. The problem is not only in teaching, it's also in research, the way we practice research. But it occurred to me that Hertie School is a good place to ask, what are you doing about all those questions? And you are, as a graduate dean, and the way you ask the question, it seems that I'd like to hear what you have to say and to share your experience.
Okay, that would mean I would leave my moderator role that came also up in the previous roundtable before the lunch. But what the way we try to, I think, embed it in our or have embedded it in our curriculum development is through interdisciplinary, is through having our programs designed as interdisciplinary programs, right? Where we have law, public policy, public management, and statistics, as well as economics, as the foundational courses across the programs. Still, I think we are we should have more of a discussion. Is that the best composition for the challenges we're facing today? Feedback I got just recently in the conversations from students was also that they want more from the student side, more history, history of public administration, history of the state, nation development, political philosophy, political theory, which we do not focus a lot on in our curriculum. So I see there's also a bit of a demand from the student side. And I understand Joseph.
I have two footnotes. One is to problematize the word academia. And here, when I was in a position to decide, I took what many considered a wrong or unpopular position. I said, a university should not have a position on anything as such, except when there's an attack on the idea of the university. So the university should not have a position on Ukraine. But that doesn't mean that academia doesn't have, because the university doesn't, but the professors, academics, can have a position and should have a position. But I resisted any attempt to say the university should make a statement that what's happening in Ukraine is terrible, etc. I said, speak out for yourself, write op-eds, etc. The only time the university should take a position as an institution, it's when the idea of the university itself is under attack. So the way I'm problematizing it is to say that the word academia is a little bit too broad. We can make a distinction between academia, institutionally speaking, and academics. The second point, which is banal and a little bit trite, but I happen to believe in it. So since I teach law, I also teach theology. These are two disciplines which are replete with values. So I tell my law students, you cannot just ask yourself, what is the law? You have to take a position whether the law is a just law, is an unjust law, etc. So you have to, values are terribly important. But I'm not going to feed you the values which you should believe in. I'm just going to give you the tools for which you will make up your own mind. So I want you always to take a value position, a normative position, but don't look for me to give you the normative position. Just look to me to give you the tools to think about it in a complex, because normativity is usually complex. To give you the tools to think about it, then take a position. Don't just say, I'm like social scientists, value-free. There's no such thing value-free. Also in law, there's no such thing, positivism. Well, the law is the law is the law, let's move on. But don't look to me to tell you what are the values that you should cherish. And there you are right. That's our role as educators. We can improve the normative toolkit, not just the analytical toolkit, but the normative toolkit, how to think about values in a more sophisticated, a deeper, more profound way. But I don't regard it as my role to say, and this is the right position from a normative point of view. I know that's banal, but I say it. Last little sneaky comment. Your colleagues who go into the class and, speak their mind, etc., I don't want to condemn them, because I can see there can be but I always have the suspicion that they might not be so interested in the educational value, but interested in feeling good about themselves.
Quick response. Before we open the floor, I open the floor to the audience. David, or not, up to you.
I always felt that the radical left and the radical right have something in common, which is, and this commonality is intolerance, right? But also righteousness, whatever, you know what I mean. So this, I agree. But again, what do you do in order to teach the students here in Hertie to speak, to debate, to take the time, because we don't have this class, we don't have this curriculum. We don't, is it part of class or?
So what we did in the past 2 years is indeed we were offering a set of workshops that were indeed titled "How to Talk About Contested Issues." So that was not academic not academic classes or seminars. It was more skills workshops. I would call them, for like a couple of hours or also over the weekend. That was one. Second was also that we now, and that is again not teaching, but it's a way of talking to students about it, is that we include in our welcome week a workshop of a few hours for students on, how to formulate a position in an intercultural environment or in a diverse environment in a way that it resonates with others and that is respectful and that it complies with sort of standards of a good academic debate. So that's the type of thing.
It's very nice, but still we have to think if skills like that should be part of the curriculum or stay, marginal part. And I would experiment with putting it into the curriculum. I know that the curriculum we have a limited number of hours and so on, and then we also faculty, right? Which faculty will teach it? It's also a problem.
Yes. But yes, I think that is indeed the discussion we should have at public policy and public policy programs and schools. But with that, I would also like to open the floor, looking at the time for some questions and comments. And I see Kai here first. So I would collect Kai first, and please introduce yourself with your question.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Kai Wegri from the Hertie School here. I want to thank the panel. I have two concrete questions, but I would start with the remark to David. I thank you very much for your remarks on how you are positioned and how you feel as a scholar in Israel. It's not about only what you said, but how you said that. It really is felt here, and it's very important that you did that. So thank you for that. Two concrete questions. The first one is simple. If one organization or set of organizations is under attack, the question one could ask is with whom to build coalitions? So what would be ways to forge coalitions with other actors to strengthen the position of universities under attack? The other one is a little bit more complicated and goes back to the discussion you just had about normative perspectives and values. And when you talk about it, Professor Weiler, I assume that because it's in law, there is a clear set of perspectives that are in the background of a Socratic debate between students. When I think about our field, public policy, or our field here, regulation and governance, I wonder, do we have this compass? And I also wonder to what extent our research and our concepts have normative connotations that are not really explicit. And that's why we cannot teach them in a Socratic way, because we're not even aware of them ourselves. So the concrete question I like to ask is then to David, in the development of scholarship on regulation, regulatory governance, and maybe beyond that public policy as well, do we need to be more normative in the sense that we really openly discuss what are the normative foundations of specific empirical perspectives, of specific comments we do? That links to the discussion we had with Michael yesterday about kind of victim blaming that Michael did a little bit, that the attacks on the regulatory state are to some extent an own goal because expert-driven decision-making is exclusive, and this type of arguments he made. But in relation to our discussions about higher education and the classroom here, I mean, where do we check what are the normative foundations and what kind of meta foundations are behind such things as, oh, an independent regulatory agency is a good thing, right? It's not good when it's not independent. Yeah, really, why? So have a very simple discussion of that is hard for us because we don't have the normative content. That's really weak.
And it's the product of our education and specialization and so on.
Can we collect just a few questions? There was, yes.
Thank you. My name is Anna Moskal, and for the context, I did 2 masters in Poland, then I moved to Australia. So, Katarína, I can definitely confirm that what you said about Slovakia is also seen in other Central Eastern European countries. And if I can ask you a question, because I wonder, coming from post-communist country, who also struggle with our Russian neighbor, whether your view on universities and that shouldn't take a stand about Ukraine is the same as Joseph, or whether you think that universities should take a stand given how many millions of Ukrainian students we have.
Thank you. And then to the first row, and then I would say we give it back first and then take a second round.
Hi, Denny Kudrna. I'm another Central European who moved to the other side of the world, to New Zealand. Just for the context, because the question is that not all countries are or have sort of slid into the authoritarian or kind of polarized pathway as far as the 3 examples that the panel members represent. So I just wonder, for those who are somewhat luckier that they are not yet that far, what would you recommend academics and universities to do? Are there any actions that we could take in New Zealand, Australia, where the polarization is not so extreme, at least not yet, to make the societies more resilient and to help to preserve the democratic freedoms, the academic freedoms, something that you maybe regret that you haven't had sort of the vision to do a bit earlier. And then maybe just a short comment on the Kai's question. It's there are, even in New Zealand, there are attempts to start the culture wars and the polarizations. And what was an interesting situation is that regulatory impact assessment, something that we think of as very technocratic tools, became a forum where the public servants told the government, the party in the coalition that is pushing the culture war narratives, these are bad ideas, don't do it, stop it. And the media picked up on it. So all of a sudden, something that we discuss at these conferences, or maybe another example would be the Australia's regulation of access of kids under 16 to social networks. It's another technocratic, pragmatic regulatory things, and it's part of defending the democracies. It's becoming a lot more important in a context that we probably don't think about regulatory tools having a role. So that's just a comment that we are becoming a conference about defending democracies through any tools that are left, perhaps.
Yes, I would agree. Increasingly, right, we've been discussing over the past, or since yesterday, the sort of the link between regulation and democracy and the sort of interlinkages. But there were comments, I think, or questions for all 3 of you. Why would we not start from here and then go over there?
I think I better, because I agree with you with the premise of what you say, I will just pass then.
Then we pass on to Katarína, please.
I will start with what I think we collectively underestimated in Central and Eastern Europe, and that is the degree of conspiracies and hybrid war that was going on and that we noticed too late. And what I regret is that I personally also think I could have done more in the classes in terms of how to work with the resources to realize whether you are working with regular resources or conspiracies, because they are really difficult to distinguish when you. So I really regret, and I think that a collective blame for academia, but I would go even further. I think that even EU have underestimated the extent of the hybrid war that was going on in Central and Eastern Europe. And that, I guess, is also account for what the contested issues are, that some of the contested issues are related to this. And that's when there is also attack on students and how they can speak, or teachers, how can they speak. I think that it is the role of institution, university, to say something. And that's why I also think that we have a certain commitment to have and provide the education also for Ukrainian students. And when that is again attacked, I think that it is again not only academia but institution that should speak up.
Thank you. Joseph, recommendations or wisdom maybe for New Zealand or Australia?
I want to say one comment on the discipline. It's true that the very essence of the legal discipline is contestation. The students learn every case that goes before a court, there will be a lawyer arguing one side and arguing another side. So contestation, we often in the classroom say, what are the strongest arguments against this position? Because you don't know which side you will find yourself. But it's a double-edged sword. Why is it a double from a normative point of view? Because students come in the first semester of their law studies, they realize every case there's a 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court. You can argue on this side and that side. And it corrodes their belief that there can be actually a normative position, because everything has two arguments to it. So on the one hand, it encourages contestation and questioning. On the other hand, it corrodes a kind of normative commitment. Okay, you can argue, but it doesn't mean that there's no, from a normative point of view, right or wrong. So it's both an advantage of the legal discipline, but also a disadvantage, because our students become normatively corroded. They just don't believe everything has two sides to it. So there's no actual side, there's no truth, there's no right and wrong. I will tell you a real dilemma. So take the protests, the occupations, the camps, etc. And there again, I took an unpopular position in that debate in my university. Why did I take it? Because I think a university is a special place. When you go into a church, you take off your hat, because you're going into a church. You feel that you're desperate to pee, but you won't walk into a cemetery and pee in a cemetery, because there's a certain dignity to the place. The university is also, there's a certain canon of behavior in a university. You want to protest, picket the university, go into the public square with etc. But when you walk into the university, you leave your megaphone outside. It's not who speaks loudest, it's argument, reason that should prevail. And that's why I said all the protests, people with strong normative commitments, and sometimes I agreed with their normative commitment, but when you walk into the precincts of the university, just as in a church you take your hat off, in a university you leave your megaphone outside. It's not who shouts loudest. Imagine that in every controversial normative position there would be an occupation, because people feel, and we want people to have strong normative commitment. So I said the university imposes a certain discipline, and that's why I was against the occupations, the protests that actually disrupted what I think is the correct, what the university should do. Here, it's not who speaks loudest, but whose arguments are the strongest, and there's a tension between the two.
We had other, so I think it was Eva first, then we move over to there, and then Martin. Yes, fine. You decide.
Thank you. Judith van Erpen, Utrecht University, the Netherlands. So I really appreciate this discussion and the openness with which you've talked about your dilemmas. I'm sometimes a bit jealous of our human rights colleagues, scholars, because they can apply their, am I loud enough? Should I speak louder? They can apply their...
No, I'm just deaf.
No, but I would like you to hear. So they can apply their scholarship very easily to what's going on and say this is a violation of human rights. And I'm looking for ways, or I would like to hear your thoughts about ways in which regulatory governance scholars could do within their discipline research that keeps the rule of law alive, or at least contributes to the debate. So I was wondering what your thoughts were about our research agendas. So, for example, two examples that came to my mind. When we discuss trust in government, like we often do, when we research that, should we, maybe if we would do that in Israel, not do more effort to investigate the trust of Palestinian citizens in the Israeli government, or Dutch voters for Geert Wilders in the Dutch government, for example? Well, I had another example, I'll leave it.
Thank you. Then Eva and Martin.
All right, thank you very much. Eva Heidbreder, University of Magdeburg. First, a small question, because we focused so much on the classroom. I think already 15 years ago at an IPSA in Canada, certain scholars didn't get into the country. One IPSA, I think, was moved from Turkey to Poland last minute because of political turmoil, or was it ECPR?
It was, but the real reason was publishers couldn't get their books in, and therefore the organizer decided to remove. So we'd sidestepped that ethical decision. I still have the emails.
All right, so it was not, at the time Poland was the place to flee to. And so what about, I mean, we have retrenchment in the global environment and that. And now my real question is, you distinguished between academics and academia. But I think we have to be worried more about academia as it was, as it is, and as it will be. Because if we have that retrenchment, that's a natural position, we tend to say less. The critical, the falling out of line of your peer group becomes more painful, maybe dangerous. If I look at my university in Germany, where you think things are safe in that, I see the self-censoring already. Now, and if you look at history, there's a fantastic interview with Hannah Arendt, 1964 on German TV. And she says in 1933, when the elections took place, we were not surprised by the Nazis, but all my academic colleagues turned their back on me. That was the real treason. I'm not so sure academia is I think that is in academia without judgment. And therefore, when we speak about academic freedom, due to issues of cultural war or of what are we allowed to say, how do we censor ourselves in normative terms, and then, that's a different issue, external state intervention to block academic freedoms. We tend to, and you don't do that, well, we tend to speak about, can we say what we want to say? And that's not the topic. We have three, and thank you, you're all three scholars of personal convictions and compass. Academia as such does not have personal compass in that sense. Don't we need some kind of single elements you put up as standards for what we define as academic freedom? It can't be just, we can say what we want to say. It's not that. It comes with responsibilities. It comes with ethics. It comes with, and I think that's also the thing, it doesn't come, and we had that debate in Germany as well with a very democratic candidate and that during COVID who said, but in science there are different views and all sides have to be heard. No, that's not academia. It is the better argument in a contestation, and that's it. That's the end of that. So what about academia in the larger sense? And don't we have to define what academic freedom then is, and its limits, more than just being able to that, and speak more about the responsibility in that which individuals can have, but don't we need more?
Yes, hello, Martin Lodge, LSE. I've got one sort of two completely opposite views, I think, here, but one is some elements here, are they really new or are they eternal to the debate about what is a university? I mean, reading Aaron Wildawski's experience of 1968 or my LSE forefathers fighting it out whether there should be a gate to the senior common room with the activist scholar on the one hand, with the student union and the other social democratic people thinking that shouldn't be the case. You know, it seems to me the role of what is a scholar is an eternal debate in these things, and we have, so part of this debate I think we still have, and my colleagues who believe that teaching is to give voice to the suppressed rather than something else, right? That, you know, they have a pedagogical statement even, which I have to deal with. So one question is, to what extent is this 1968 revisited to some extent in the debates? And I'm too young to really have a judgment on that. The other question is sort of, well, one to Joseph Weiler in particular, when we talk about contestation, but is it not also important to study where the boundaries of the contestation are and where they move? So while I might disagree with you, and so we can study, you know, a disagreement at one point in time, would we not notice possibly that the boundaries on our disagreements, justifications we take, the backing, these things, so the reference point on which we base our arguments, that these are shifting? I mean, is that a way to come back to the studying the boundaries of contestation and what is acceptable or what is not acceptable in a liberal democracy rather than a suppression point? I don't know whether that makes sense. But the other question is the university inherently an elite project? Because you could, an elite project. So should we, you know, it's a sacred place, and should we stay in there and do our stuff? Because you might say all public policy schools, my place is a case in point. We were created as an evening school for civil servants, possibly local government officials, to basically improve the state of municipal waste and all that. Where are we now? £45,000, you know, kind of similar audience. We don't teach that sort of thing anymore, not enough money in it. You might even extend the classroom, and I'm not talking digital here, we're talking here extending the classroom to the 14-year-old, if not the 8-year-old. So should this classroom we are thinking about, should we extend it? Is that the role, or are we an elite project?
Thank you. So why would we not start the other way around now? With Joseph, with you.
Lots of questions. When are we meant to finish?
3 minutes ago.
I know everybody sitting here believes in the rule of law, except when it comes to respecting the times in conferences, aren't we? So, yes, these are eternal problems, so to speak. And we don't expect to have categorical answers. So, and the value of discussion, but something that connects. So there are no human rights that are absolute. Really. So some things are talking about, you know, the limits. There's an easy limit. I would not allow a professor who came and taught that the earth is flat. That seems to me to be an easy case. But beyond that, it becomes difficult. In the United States, in the name of freedom of expression, a bunch of neo-Nazis can march with the protection of the police through a neighborhood of Jewish survivors. In Germany, they would be put in prison before they even took the first step in that direction. It's not easy to decide. Or denial of the Holocaust. In some countries in Europe, it's a crime to deny the Holocaust. I happen to feel that that's an absurd position to take, but at least, so it's very difficult when it comes to those boundaries, except if you take really obvious cases, to decide exactly where would be those boundaries. But you are right that we should discuss the dilemma of setting boundaries, and people will take positions. Some people here would think, yes, denial of the Holocaust should be a crime. People like me will explain why this is not a good idea at all, for a variety of reasons. So with that, I tend to agree that we should not eliminate the idea that there are limits to rights, and one has to discuss. In some cases, we will just result in a disagreement, and it's also historically conditioned. Just one last comment on the rights culture. I don't want to live in a country that doesn't protect fundamental rights. But you have noticed how the discourse of duty has practically disappeared. We always talk about rights and more rights and more rights, but we never talk about duties of citizens towards society, etc. You know the famous book of Dworkin, Taking Rights Seriously. So almost as an act of protest, I gave a seminar last year which was called Taking Duty Seriously. And I did it in the context of climate control. Let's talk about climate control, not with the vocabulary of rights, but with the vocabulary of duties, because it's so rare to find, both in the academic literature and in public discourse, as long as you don't violate criminal law and pay your taxes, you're okay. And that can't be the good society that we believe in. But these questions were profound, and we would need another seminar to really go into them in depth. So I'll keep my mouth shut now.
Thank you, Joseph. Katarína.
I think the question of elitism within universities can be questioned in contexts where we know already that 40% of the population or of the age of these people are already going to the universities, and the universities are free, so basically really anybody can go to the universities. Are there still an elitist project? That's a question. Towards the boundaries, I think that we have already seen here that we are fighting about the boundaries. For you, it's really the flat Earth. For me, it's when somebody says, which is happening in Slovakia, where I expected the response of the university, that vaccination does not work and should not be done at all, not only COVID, at all. So is it the role of the university to speak up or not? Or the academia?
The university as such, or academics in the university?
Oh, and that's a question. Because
and that's probably one where we disagree on.
So finally some disagreement.
You tried to disagree with yourself. Well, yeah, I didn't manage it. Nobody heard it.
So, and I guess it goes back to also the conspiracies, because where do they start and where do they end, and where the academics, academia, and the university should talk or not to talk about where is the evidence on what is the role of the evidence, and bring the discussion back to positions. But if the discussion is not about positions, then isn't it our role to bring it to the positions?
David.
It's difficult because I'm the last one, and I want to say something wise, but I still I have something to say which is not necessarily nice, wise, or so much clever. I was intrigued by Martin's thinking about the university as an elite project. I think what happened in the 20th century, it moved from elite project to a state project in the positive and negative way. And we are fighting to keep this elite idea of what is the university within the state project. And there is, in different states, there is this space to keep the idea of the university, but at the same time being the servant of the state, economic development, training, all those professional school, including public school, but not only. And then the humanities are still struggling, and the future of the university is the future of humanities. And we need to keep the humanities there, lively and kicking, which means political theory, political philosophy, history within our school, professional school, with the part which is growing, and also the sciences, the art sciences, computer, and so on. Now, the last thing about Judith's question: what do you do in order to bring more normative aspect? The way I personally solved it is to develop 3 years ago, starting to develop, and it's gradually, a course on injustice and redress. And I think the public policy schools do not take or give to social justice enough place. Not only injustice, teaching injustice and analyze it in social science theory, but also how do you redress injustice? And we have, if I were 30 years younger, maybe I would start working on redress as a project for public policy. How do you redress? You cannot bring this from wherever they are. You cannot bring them to life, right? But there are so many people who are hurt and suffers and experience injustice. It can be a very small injustices, interaction with teachers or child abuse and so on. And those issues are not part of our world, and it probably can be. So injustice and redress class that I give a seminar and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for also for sharing this experience and about this class. We are way over time, so rather than having like a closing round and a question, I would just like to take the opportunity to thank all of you for very openly sharing your views and experiences. What I take away from this discussion is a couple of things. First, we could probably have gone on much longer and taken more of the larger questions as well. So fundamental challenges to the role of university can be discussed in very many ways and with very many sort of sub-questions. What I also take away, and that is related, is even though the context, all three contexts are very different, many of the questions that are currently discussed in each of your contexts are then similar, right? And also resonate with other contexts that are here represented in the room, which also I think gives us food for thought and food for more discussions. Joseph, you started in your very early in this conversation today. You were saying, well, maybe we should also, that is at least how I understood you, be a bit more self-critical as universities or as scholars or academics or academic institutions, and have self-critical discourse about what is maybe the contribution of academic, or has been the contribution of academic institutions to the polarization, into the anti-elitism that we're seeing, which also I think would open room and space for just another like 90 minutes discussion. So I think there was much more, of course, to discuss. We probably will do this as you were also referring to, as we survive, hopefully, all of this. And one way, and that is now really the closing here, one way or one option where we could discuss all of this is, of course, tomorrow's panels, but also tonight at the dinner. So remember, there is a conference dinner at 7 in the Alte Turnhalle in Berlin-Friedrichshain. Everyone is, of course, invited, and that would be a venue for further discussion. But for now, please, an applause for the three speakers. Thank you very much.